Okay, hello Samantha. Hi. Okay, this is your teacher training class, and you should have some handouts there. Samantha, did you happen to write your 500 words on a favorite teacher?
Yeah.
Okay, can you email that to me?
Yep.
Okay, Elena, we were doing for today 500 words on a favorite teacher and why they were a favorite teacher for us. So if you want to do that, then you can get it to me, okay? All right, let's pray and we'll begin. Lord, we thank you for your many blessings. Thank you for your goodness, your mercy. Pray that you'd strengthen us, help us this day in this class to be led of you and be better for it. In Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, we're going to look at this paper here that has your, should be some PowerPoint slides pictured on it. Make sure you have it. That's last month's.
Oh, it's last month.
Yeah. That's for the last class. That's the last class. Should be another one there. Yeah, right, that's
Good one. There, we'll go back here.
okay. All right, so we're not going to do all of this here on these PowerPoints, but be sure you bring this or have this with you next month because we'll finish up. But we're going to be talking about some teaching guidelines for large groups, small groups, different kinds of methods that we can use. And so hopefully you'll find this beneficial. Remember, I'm saying this is a class that helps you to take all the knowledge you're getting and learn how to teach it, communicate it effectively to other people. Okay, just avoid, just ignore the date on there, that 2014-15 shouldn't be there. Okay, so we talked last month about two things the best teachers have in every situation, and that is a close relationship with students, they show genuine care and concern, and that the law of love rules in every situation. Then also we mentioned 3 dangers to avoid in teaching: being prideful, your own interpretation, and Phariseeism. In other words, we need to practice what we preach or teach, let our walk match our talk, and always remember your actions speak louder than your words. All right? So when we look at different types of teaching methods, we realize we cannot compromise our message, but our methods are not sacred. Our methods must adjust to each generation. Man's knowledge has increased more in the last 50 years than it did for thousands of years previously. And I think we would all agree that the age of technology has changed everything, even the way we live. All right? So when we are teaching, there's 3 parts that we go for in our lesson. We set a goal, which is introducing what we're going to teach. We fire the trigger, we get right into our lesson, and then we go back and ask, did we teach effectively? We need to always expect results when we teach, not just say, I'm going to go teach this lesson, and that's all there is to it. But we go expecting to see results in our students. Now, sometimes those results don't come quickly, sometimes it can be years before we see results, but we know that when we are teaching the Word of God, we will see results. Okay, now the next slide there talks about prepare, and it breaks it down into an acrostic there. And you have a paper, a clip there called Preparing to Present. You want to see if you have that? It should be underneath what you're looking at now, Elena. Preparing to Present, and it's a lesson. No, just go on further. It's a lesson I'd like for you to read this month for next month. Okay, let me say that some of this material is dated. They talk about using methods that we no longer use anymore, like film strip projectors and things like this. But just realize it's the principles we're talking about in it, not so much the individual methods. All right, did you find it there? Okay, so read that for next month, preparing to present. And it's broken down in that acrostic. All right, let's go on to the next page of our PowerPoint slides. Samantha, in your experience, what would you say, thinking back over teachers you've had, would be the best method that was ever used to teach you a lesson? Elena, you'd be thinking as well. Think back to your school years. What is a lesson that you remember, or even in the church, something that was taught you that made such a positive impact on you? How did the teacher do it? How did you, what was the teacher you had that made it all so interesting?
Well, she taught my favorite subject, so it's not really bad.
Okay. What was your favorite subject?
History.
History. Well, now that is a subject that can be very boring to some people.
Mm-hmm.
How did she make it interesting?
She always mixed up different things. So sometimes we'd do group work, sometimes we'd do different activities, and she'd always make us do something rather than just write down and do
Okay,
different
she involved you in the lesson. Okay, very, very important. So, like I said, history is often considered a very boring subject, but she made it come alive, she made it interesting, had you involved in it, and that is a very important key right there. Elena, was there any subject or lesson that you can remember that really impacted you?
Yeah, I really like science.
Science.
Yeah.
Oh, right, that's another one. I don't care for science, all right, but how did your teacher make it interesting?
Yeah, I liked it because when we do something, we learn a particular subject, we have to do the practicals. And the practical will make even me to get more, to learn more about the subject we have been.
Okay, the practical aspect of
Yeah,
it.
doing the
The
practical.
practical, and again, you were involved in
Yeah.
it, and
Mhm.
that made all the difference.
Mm.
Very important. All right, you see 11 points there about methods you can use for large groups to teach. Say you have 20 plus people that you're going to be teaching, okay? Elena, would you just read out those 11 things to us?
Okay, this lecture,
Mm-hmm.
overhead transparencies, shows PowerPoint, black shows whiteboard, drama, films, videos, slides, DVDs, maps, charts, debates, panel discussion,
Symposiums.
symposiums, and educational outings, bus groups, discussion groups.
Okay, now some of those you would obviously know what they are. Some of them you may not, and we're going to talk more about number 1, the lecture method. You will know what PowerPoint is, you'll know what Blackboard, Whiteboard is, drama, DVDs, maps, charts. What is a debate, and how can this be a good teaching method? Do you have any idea what a debate is for?
And there's two opposing sides in terms of learning.
Yes.
One and another view, and then
They each present their side. Now, the interesting thing is, they may not even believe the side they're taking, but they can present a logical and organized argument for that side. Okay, say I'm going to have 2 people debate abortion. Well, maybe they're both against abortion, but the one who's on the pro side has to present a logical argument to convince the audience of abortion, okay? I'm not telling them to lie, but I'm just saying they have to present a logical argument for it. All right, what's a panel discussion? Any idea what that is, a panel discussion?
Yeah, it's a group discussing about anything, and to have to come with a conclusion with what they have been discussing.
Okay, you take a group of people and usually they'll sit at a table
Yeah.
and maybe the topic is a discussion. It can be an organized panel discussion or it can be spontaneous. The organized panel discussion was where, okay, everybody knows what the topic is and maybe even questions are handed in beforehand. Or if there's been no questions handed in, the moderator, the person who is leading this, can have prepared questions. Maybe it's the recent earthquakes and hurricanes, okay? So we're gonna discuss this, okay? So they have prepared questions, or spontaneous is when they just take questions from the audience, okay? They're not rehearsed. So if you have prepared questions, you can even let the panelists see them beforehand. Spontaneous ones, some people think that can be a little dangerous because you don't know what kind of questions you're gonna get. But it's where you have maybe 4 or 5 people that will answer questions about a certain subject, okay? A symposium. A symposium is when you will have people write like papers on a topic and then they present them to an audience, okay? So people do a lot of research, a lot of study. They bring together a written paper on a subject and then they present that. All right, educational outings, you'll know what that is. Buzz groups, discussion groups. Okay, so maybe I'm talking about the subject of suffering. So I'll have 3 or 4 groups, and this is good for a large audience, 3 or 4 groups, or maybe even more groups. We get into groups of 10 or 15, and we discuss a certain aspect about suffering. Or you can have questions that are the same for all the groups, or you can have questions that are different for each group, okay? I do this a lot when I'm teaching some classes. I'll have them break into discussion groups rather than just listening to me say it. And then at the end, they pick one person from the group to stand up and give the answers to the questions they have discussed. It gets people involved, it gets them teaching, like Samantha, you said group work, okay? So, the interesting thing is that more than all these other types of methods of teaching that, like you said, things that got you involved, often lecture is the most commonly used one. Now, let me stress here, as you see on the slide, we're talking about teaching, not preaching. All right? You have a paper that looks, it says the Sony vacuum study. It looks like this. You have a paper that looks like this. Okay? We're going to look at that for just a minute. And you have to fill in some blank spots there. Do you have one? Do you have yours, Samantha?
I think so.
Okay.
But I don't have the PowerPoint that you guys are talking about.
You don't have the PowerPoint?
No. Was that sent last week?
Yeah, it was 2 weeks ago.
Okay, might be interesting to find it.
It should have been in the folder under teacher training. Take a minute and look and see if you have it.
What's the title of it? Is it like a book form or literally like a PowerPoint?
It looks like PowerPoint slides. I'll show it to you.
I don't think I got that. I got the a book, a syllabus, and then just lesson 1, fill in the blank.
You haven't received lesson 2 for teacher training? September materials?
No, I only got the fill in the blanks ones.
What do you mean the fill in the blank ones?
The values of lecturing.
Right, that's part of it.
Is that part of the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yeah, I only have values of lecturing, limitations of lecturing, and it's just that one page.
Right.
Right.
Okay, well, those are the ones you need to fill in the blanks, so that's good you have them, but I'll send you the whole thing. Okay, but did you receive a paper like this?
Yes, yeah, that one.
Okay, all right, so this was a study that was done that revealed a lot about how we retain information, so if you can fill in the blanks, it would be good. The Saucony vacuum study revealed that when a class is conducted by using just lecture, students will remember 70%, if you want to write that in, Sister Elena, 70% of what they heard 3 hours later. But 3 days later, they will remember only 10%. But when students hear a lecture and see visuals which accompany it, they will remember 85% 3 hours later and 65% 3 days later. Through the Saucony vacuum research, they discovered that people learn 1% through taste, 1.5% through touch, 3.5% through smell,
3.5.
3.5, 11% through hearing, and 83% through sight. They also discovered that adults remember 10% of what they read, 20% of what they hear, 30% of what they see, 50% of what they see and hear, 70% of what they say as they talk, and 90% of what they say as they do something. So this is just bringing out what you just said a while ago, that involvement is the key, all right? I can tell you how to bake a cake, but if I take you into the kitchen and we do it together, you're going to remember it much better than if I just lecture you on how to bake a cake. All right? So it shows us the importance of involvement. All right, let's go back to our PowerPoint and we'll talk about the lecture. Okay? So what is the value of lecturing? All right, now, when we're talking about real pure lecturing, I remember so well a teacher I had in college, world civilization, and he stood up in front of probably close to 100 of us and for 1 hour lectured us, never asking us questions, never involving us in any way, shape, or form. Would you like to know what I remember about world history or world civilization? Zero. All I remember is that he stood there and lectured us, and I don't know anything about it. Okay? So that was a pure, unadulterated lecture. A lot of times you mix lecture with other things, all right? So the values of it. Number one, I know these are small spaces, but try to write in it. There's a large quantity of material is transmitted, okay? So when you have a lecture, you have a large quantity of material that is transmitted. Large quantity of material is transmitted. A lot of information is given. Number two, control. The teacher is in control of the material, the emphasis, the time element. So number two is control. Okay. Number three, another reason it's used is it saves time. A lot of material is covered in a short amount of time, so it saves time. In a lecture, number four, the personality of the teacher is foremost in a lecture. How someone feels is going to come through as they're lecturing. And then number 5, and this is what you need to do, is combine a variety of other techniques with a lecture. Combine a variety of other techniques with a lecture. All right, then the next slide at the bottom, what are the limitations of lecturing? Number 1, often there is minimum participation from the class, as I just shared about my world civilization class. Then you have individual differences between teacher's opinion and student opinion can develop. So there's differences between the opinions. And the thing is, if it's a straight lecture, this is never brought out, okay? Because the teacher doesn't stop to ask any questions or to get any feedback. All right, then number 3, this is a good one. Attention can lapse. Just because a class is quiet doesn't mean they're listening. They may be sleeping or daydreaming, okay? So I don't always like to have a totally quiet class because, like I said, it could be sleeping or daydreaming. And then also, number 4, students can be left with unanswered questions. Unanswered questions. The teacher doesn't give any room for discussion or questions. Number 5, students may have something valuable to contribute, but may not get the opportunity. They may not get the opportunity. Lectures require more skill than any other teaching method to keep it interesting. And sadly, many times the teacher with the least skill uses it the most. I had in Sunday school a teacher, and again, this is what I remember. It was the 10-year-old girls class. It was a large church, and here we were, these girls, no tables, just rows of chairs, sat up facing a teacher who stood up for the entire Sunday school lesson and read the teacher's manual to us. That was our lesson. Again, do I remember anything she said? No. And she was a nice lady, a good godly woman. But I remember nothing of what she said. All I remember is this nice lady standing up there and reading her teacher's manual to us. And that's sad. I feel sad about that, but it certainly is a good example to share with you. All right? Then also lastly, number 7, personality clashes can develop between the teacher and student. Personality clashes. And so, again, there's no opportunity to find that out. All right? Now let's go on to the next page. 6 times when you should use the lecture method. All right, Samantha, could you read those to us? Do you have those? No, you don't have that. Okay, Elena, you read it to us.
Yeah. To introduce a series of lessons to stimulate interest and explanation. Number 2, to summarize a series of lessons to present material that is unavailable to class. If they can find it themselves, let them. That's it. Number 4, to use as background for discussion, to fulfill a specific knowledge aim. And number 6, when the time element is short.
All right, so these can be some times when you might have to use the lecture method. But here's some questions to ask yourself as you prepare to teach. If you're using the lecture method, ask yourself, why am I using the lecture method? Is it for one of these reasons that we just read? Or is it because I don't want to do anything else, or I like to hear myself talk, or I'm not prepared to make it something that's interactive? You know, back to my cake example, it's much easier for me to sit here and tell you how to make a cake than to go buy all the ingredients, get everything laid out, bring you in there, and have you make a mess. Okay? That takes a lot more work, but you're going to remember that far more than me sitting here. So is there a good reason why I'm using the lecture method, or is it just because I don't have time, or I'm lazy, I'm not organized, I'm not going to put forth the effort to do something else? Also ask yourself, must I lecture for the entire session? Okay, do I have to do this for the full hour? Or can I have some handouts? Can I have something on the board? Can I have some pictures? Can I have some group discussions? Can I involve other things? And then number 3, how will I secure and maintain attention, interest, and involvement? How am I going to keep you engaged to keep you from sleeping? You know, many people can sleep sitting straight up. I see it every year in Bible school, okay? Samantha's shaking her head because she can probably do that, huh? The teacher this week in the full-time was telling me about a student said he slept the entire class the other day, you know? Oh, anyway, how as a teacher do I keep that from happening? All right? Number 4, do I frequently repeat and review the main points? And that's important that we do that. And do I lead to a logical conclusion or climax? That is very important that we do it. I remember one year in Bible school, when my daughter was in Bible school, she told me about a teacher they had, and they had discussion on a certain subject, but she said he never brought it to a conclusion for us. We were left hanging with questions. And so it's very important that you bring a class to a conclusion. Now, when I say conclusion, that doesn't mean everybody's going to agree, but at least they bring all the ideas together and bring it to some type of a finished point. All right, some more questions to ask yourself as you prepare a lecture. Is the outline of the lesson clear, and is it consistent with my aim of teaching? So I'm not going to come in this class that is supposed to be teaching you how to teach and decide that I'm going to teach you today about the joys of football in Scotland. Okay, I'm not going to, that's not consistent with what I'm doing. So keep it on the subject. Am I using any visual aids? If not, why not? Can I not make a PowerPoint? Can I not do something? Can I not dress up in a costume? I was telling the first years, you'll remember this from last year maybe, and doing their presentations about Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Okay, well, make it interesting. You can dress up. You can talk in the first person. My name is Abraham. I left my home. I traveled to another land I knew not where. Make it interesting. All right, and then illustrations to incorporate are very helpful. Am I answering questions that students might have? Okay, so I bring up a subject. Let's go back to the abortion subject. That's going to be a very controversial subject. Hopefully not in the church, but who knows who could be in your class. All right, but am I answering questions? Or am I leaving any time for them to ask questions, or just going, oh, I got to get this lesson done by 4:15, so I'm going to hurry. I got to hurry. I can't stop to ask you any questions because I got to get through this material. One thing I always say, remember, you're not teaching a lesson, you're teaching students. And sometimes teachers can feel they've just got to get so through this material that they fail to think, is there any questions? All right? And then here's another one. I tell students, I just told someone today, better to be too short than too long. Oh Lord, fill my mouth with worthwhile stuff and nudge me when I've said enough. Okay? Some people just go on and on and on, and they could have stopped 10 minutes ago. Okay? So you'd rather have people anxious for you to come back and teach than think, oh dear, wonder how long they'll be today. You don't want to create that type of reputation for yourself. All right? So those are some questions to ask yourself as you prepare to teach, and especially if you're using the lecture method. All right? So in the next box there, it ends with learning is doing. As much as possible, let the students do it themselves or demonstrate their ability to do something. Okay, so I want to know if you can make a cake. I'm going to let you do it, and I'll find out if you can. But if I just sit here and tell you, I'm never going to know. Okay, it says the teacher who teaches least is the one who teaches most. What do you think that means? The teacher who teaches least is the one who teaches most.
And because each and everybody is being involved.
Yes. And what were you saying, Samantha?
When they let their students do the actual, like the practical stuff, that's what they're teaching.
Right, okay. More than them just talking. All right? So, those are some things about lecturing in relation to teaching large groups. At the bottom of this page, there's a box that says small group teaching methods. All right, what's some things that we can do in a small group that are effective teaching methods? If I just have 2 or 3 people, like we have in this class here, it's not going to be real effective for me to have a panel discussion, okay? Or, you know, so that's not going to be real practical, but there are things I can do. Creative writing is one of them, okay? So, like, I've given you an opportunity to write about your favorite teacher, okay? So they can write something. Another thing is, it's called circle response, okay? You get people in a circle, and I throw out a question, and each person in the circle has to respond. Say, I'm going to say, what does it mean to trust God? So we go around from person to person, and each person answers the question in their own words and with their own feelings. Or discussion, and we'll talk more next month about leading a discussion. What is brainstorming? That's another method. What does it mean to have a brainstorming session?
It's something, a question which will make you to think harder so that you can come to an answer.
Right. Okay, Samantha, say I'm going to throw out the question to you and your youth group, and you're going to have a brainstorming session. The question is, how can we better improve the National Youth Department? Now, that's not a bashing session, but it's, everybody thinks, well, I'd like to see the youth do this. I'd like to see the youth do that. You know, everybody brings their thoughts together. First thing that comes to your mind, you talk about it, and usually in that it will bring about a lot of good ideas that can be formed into something usable. Okay, we do this a lot. We have these Super Sundays here. Okay, we're getting ready to have one now. What do? Several months before, we get all the teaching staff together and we say, okay, here's the topic. How can we best portray this to the children and the adults? We want to appeal to all ages. So we all throw out our ideas, and then we come to something that is workable. Another thing for small groups is a research report, okay, that you write a report on your own. Another one is a case study. Now, what this means is I'm going to tell a story, okay? It can be usually hypothetical, but I'm going to say, okay, there's a boy named John who has just begun high school, and as he goes into the school each day at the school gates, he sees some people standing there with talking to people and exchanging money. I don't know what this means, and so can you help John to figure out what he should do? A, he should go be friends with those people. B, he should tell the principal. C, he should tell his parents. 4, he should ignore them. All right, so then the group picks what answer they think is best and why. Now, how is that different from the next point, an open-ended story? Here's the difference. John has begun high school, and he notices that there's something unusual going on at the gates of the school involving money. John should, and then they finish the story, okay? You don't give them choices, they just fill in. So that's a good teaching method. Again, it gets people thinking, it gets them involved, it gets them brainstorming, giving their ideas about what should happen. All right, let's go to the next page, Elena. And so those are some ideas